The problem of evil is a question in philosophy which has been struggled with by both atheists and theists throughout the years. In this video, we're going to be discussing why this problem isn't actually logical and why the problem of evil will actually never go away. Today, we're going to be giving you 3 reasons to believe this. First, talking about why evil itself is not academic in nature. Number 2, we're going to talk a bit more about why evil, or the problem of evil in general, would never go away in a philosophical sense. And finally, we will talk about how evil is existential in nature. I hope this video will give you a comprehensive understanding of evil and the philosophy surrounding it in general to help you understand why this is such a big problem. So let's now first develop the idea that evil is not academic. And I saw a very beautiful speech by Jordan B. Peterson about the nature of evil and the fact that evil is not something which can be reduced merely to philosophy. And I think this is such a true idea. We all experience evil. We've all known people who experience evil. I know people in my family who struggle with cancer. I know people who do not have enough money to put food on their table. They're suffering. There's so much pain in this world. All you need to do is look back in history, and in the past century alone, in China, in the communist states, there was around 60 million people dying of famine within the course of 100 years. And that's insane. It's like, well, it's just 100 years alone, 60 million people died, and that's around 10 times the population of the entirety of Hong Kong. And that's something which blows all of our minds, and that's the extent of suffering. And you look at that, and you immediately realize that you can philosophize all you want about it, analyze all you want about this evil, this suffering which is experienced by humans throughout history, and you recognize that no matter how much philosophical, scientific kind of analysis we can have of the situation, we'll never be able to explain away the existence or the existential nature of that suffering. Just think about it for a moment. Maybe you can reduce all of this suffering down to pain, the chemicals which are firing on in your neurons. Maybe you can reduce it all down to certain causes and effects in a merely Leibnizian world, that everything has its sufficient reason. Would that reduce the fact, or would that change the fact that the suffering is so extreme? Imagine if God didn't exist, and that this world was purely material, and it was only material matters, particles rubbing against each other. When someone gets shot by a gun, oh, it's just a bullet, these certain particles going through another particle made of human flesh, some carbon atoms going through some other metal atoms. Even if we just view the world from such a perspective, that would never change the fact that evil is such a big problem. Which brings me to the second point, that evil is ultimately existential. As we've discussed previously, evil can never be reduced to philosophy, science, or something else. Evil is something, and suffering as a whole, is something which is in line with human nature. You cannot separate human nature from the evil which you experience. We live in the world, and part of being in the world is to recognize that we will face evil, we will face suffering, we will face trials and tribulations at times. There is nothing we can do to avoid it, and that's one of the first things we have to recognize as beings in the world. We have to recognize that evil exists, and I know this sounds bleak, and I know this sounds horrible, and I know this sounds terrifying. But at the same time, no matter how horrible this sounds, we recognize that it is part of human nature, that we must wrestle with the evil, that we must fight and try to overcome it. And this is a reason why evil is something which is existential. You can take away absolutely everything else from life. You can take away common sense, you can take away reason, you can take away almost everything which you know, which we categorize as human. But evil will remain, and evil is one of those things, perhaps alongside love and goodness and beauty, which are part of the existential sphere of humanity that you can do nothing to get rid of. And in some ways, you can do nothing to overcome. It is there. And I mean overcome not in the sense that it will crush you all the time, but rather that it is impossible to get rid of it. And in some ways, the first part to accepting what it means to be a human in this world is to accept the existence of evil and accept the need, the responsibility that we have to fight against this evil. And sometimes that is precisely what we have to do first as humans in this world. And that's what I mean when I say evil is existential. It's not something which is logical. You can't reduce it to mere probability. Yes, you can make these philosophical arguments, but they will never fully encapsulate the extent of evil in this world. It will never encapsulate the nature of evil. And as a result, I think that the problem of evil is somewhat misguided. Not to say that the problem of evil is not a philosophical argument, because I think it can be formulated into philosophy, as we've seen in the past. But this is one of the reasons why evil never goes away. The problem of evil never goes away. I think there is a sufficient amount of literature, of philosophical discussion surrounding the problem of evil, that it goes to show that the problem of evil can never prove that God does not exist. That in itself is an incorrect statement. All the logical problem of evils have seen sufficient responses. For example, Plantinga's free will defense to Mackey's logical problem of evil. Mackey himself, in The Miracle of Theism, recognizes that that argument that Plantinga raises is sufficient to defeat his logical problem of evil. There are so many responses, theodicies, like Nietzschean theodicies, Irenaean theodicies, all of these which do or which act to respond and solve both evidential and logical problem of evil. But nevertheless, the problem of evil will remain, and I don't see it going away. Not because I think that it is a problem which is something which, atheists are just merely trying to hold on to the problem of evil for the sake of holding on to the problem of evil. I don't think that that's the case. But rather, it's that atheists and people who challenge the existence of God know in their mind that while evil is such a big problem, they can never overcome evil, and as a result, the first thing they do is question God and say, well, why does God allow this evil? And that is actually the stem of the problem of evil, and why it will never go away. Because the first thing we have to do, if we actually want to solve the problem of evil, is to bring the problem of evil beyond the philosophy. Because when you have a problem and a solution, or a problem and the root of the problem, you have to match those three together. You can't put a non-philosophical solution, or at least a non-existential solution to an existential problem. And what we see with the problem of evil today is that, well, you see evil existing in the world, then people try to put philosophy on it when evil itself is not a philosophical problem. Yes, it is philosophical in the stricter sense that you can analyze it with philosophy, but the experience of that evil can never be reduced to the philosophy. And as a result, when you're talking about philosophical problems of evil, you're just missing you're completely missing the point, because you're then trying to push philosophy onto something which it isn't philosophical in nature. And as a result, a solution to that problem itself, if you're trying to, you have to solve the philosophical problem of evil with philosophy. But if the evil itself, the root of it, is never philosophical in nature in the first place, and it is existential in nature, the problem of evil, the midway, would never go away, because the solution would never get rid of the beginning. So in order for us to resolve it, we first have to accept the existential nature of evil. So those are my thoughts about evil and why the problem of evil will not go away. This is not because of the philosophy of it. I think it's an interesting discussion, though I do think at times the discussion has to be seen in a modern context, and that we have to recognize that there have been sufficient responses to the problem of evil. Rather, we have to also recognize at the same time that the problem of evil is itself an existential problem. It's a question to what it means to be human. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. It really means a lot to me, and it really helps this channel grow. Stay safe, my friends. Let me know your comments, your thoughts, and ideas in the comments below. I answer and look at every single one of your comments, so make sure you go do that if you're interested. Stay safe. See you soon. Thank you for